Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, 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 hello. It feels a while since we've been together talking about Google Analytics and, of course, putting a lot of pressure on Jill to regale you with tales of this wonderful platform that we love very much. Where are you dialing in from? How's it going? Are you having a good day? Genuine question. Good days all round? Quiet days? Uneventful days? This is your opportunity, particularly YouTube audience. I'm looking at you to, of course, use your chat function on the right-hand side. We will be using that chat function throughout, and why I'm sort of testing it in a fun way while asking you how you are, because, of course, we'll be taking your questions throughout. When I say we, I mean mostly Jill. I don't really mean me. I'm somewhat lazier in this particular department. But it's good to see you all again for this, the fifth in the Google Analytics series for Semrush, or SEMrush, depending on where you're at in the world. This one's around how to keep reports, or how to create reports, should I say, to keep the budget flowing. Obviously, the point here is that if you don't report effectively, and it is our jobs as marketers, for those of us, of course, in this particular group who are marketers, to report. If we don't, we get fired. The end. And then you get a really long holiday, or early retirement, or thrown off a bridge. You can choose entirely at your particular discretion. But the idea behind this, of course, is actually taking the information from this wonderful platform and, of course, packaging it in a way that it is computable, that it is communicable to someone who maybe isn't as familiar with absolutely everything in the Google Analytics dashboard. End of the day, you are the closest one would ever get to that customer. So you're responsible for their voice. In this case, of course, the script being the numbers in a Google Analytics dashboard, which is some of what we'll be talking about in this particular session. I see Michigan popping up there. Hi, Michigan. Hi, Anton, also. We hope that you are kind of ready for quite an interesting session. We hope that you're going to think about some interesting questions, which, of course, we'll pick up at the end of the session as usual. This, of course, will be recorded as well. We'll send you a link to the recording around about the end. We'll send you a link to a copy of the slides as well, and a couple of resources that the lovely Jill will mention when she's talking through all things reporting in Google Analytics. So kind of a lot to do, really. For those of you who are not familiar with us, myself, or with Jill, whilst I'll let Jill introduce herself, I'm Aiden. I'm the co-founder of the Coloring In department, which, of course, the other half of which is the lovely Jill lurking in the box, doing this with her hands. She's trying to make herself look interested, but realistically, she just wants to talk. And you'll see why. She's very good at it, and she does have a little bit of a propensity to talk a lot. Do think of those questions, though, and of course, I'll be putting them to Jill. I'll also be lurking in the background in the YouTube channel as well, particularly, keeping an eye on some of your questions and passing them through to Jill where relevant. I will take as many as I possibly can. I would say, though, that I can't take them all because, as usual, it rains questions upon us from the high heavens, which is a good thing. But I'll take the ones that are most relevant. Don't feel like I've ignored you if we haven't picked them up. They're probably in the question bank for, of course, the end of this particular session. That's really it. Those are the house rules, as it were, for all things. And again, I welcome you, before I pass you to Jill, to how to create reports that keep the budget flowing for this, the great and good Semrush. Jill, quick, take it away.
Thank you, Aiden. So I'm going to now attempt to share my screen. I always get nervous at this point that it's not going to work. Let's see. All cooking? Is that yes? Cool. So I am going to do a talk for the next 50-ish minutes of all your lives on how to create reports in Google Analytics. Now, as Aiden had mentioned, the issue that a lot of people have, I think, with Google Analytics is that the language can sometimes be quite impenetrable at times. Like, it's lots of big jargony words. And when you're trying to present that information over to people that are going to sign your checks or approve your agencies or keep your job, then you have to display that information in a way that's meaningful, that somebody can understand. So we've got quite a lot to get through in this particular session, but I'm going to recap just some kind of maybe unknown knowns kind of thing. How does Google Analytics actually calculate certain metrics? There've been a few times in my past of understanding how to use analytics where I've had my ass kicked, essentially, because I didn't fully understand how this gorgeous computer program actually calculates certain metrics. I assumed, and it was the wrong assumption. We're going to look at the difference between session and user data, and that's really important because of the way that Google will assign value to those particular assets, and you can end up backing the wrong horse if you're not careful. We're going to be looking at the best ways to use the reporting interface. There's a few hidden gems in there, and then because I want to stop the death of data vomit and just creating crappy dashboards, we're going to go through some UX techniques on how to actually create some reports, and I'm going to work through some examples as well. As we mentioned before from the lovely Aiden, I can't see your questions, so Aiden is going to be lurking in the background and either answering them for me, or I will get to them at the end. So this is actually a photo representation, cartoon representation of me when I was a little girl, because I've always wanted to be a marketeer. I've wanted to be in marketing for a very long time, but at no point did I sit there and whimsically think, oh, I just can't wait to grow up and create a really big report that takes me bloody ages to create, and nobody reads it, nobody understands it, nobody cares what I have done. Aiden even told me an interesting story from an agency that he visited, and it was a really hot day, and in London you can sometimes get these really old windows to try and open. And somebody said, oh, just passes that big block over there, and there must have been about a 5 to 7 inch document that they then propped the window open. And he said, oh, what's that? And he went, oh, that's our client's Google Analytics report. Because there's something about, oh, well, if marketing can be quite intangible at times, that we can just present a report and that kind of makes up for the stuff that is a bit nebulous, the stuff that you don't really understand that we do. And actually that can go against us as marketeers. So we are going to focus now on recapping how Google calculates some things, because this has definitely got me into trouble when I've presented information before. So some of this you might know, some of this you might not know. But one of the metrics that I really wish people would kind of relax on a little bit is bounce rate. I think that this used to be a thing maybe 10 years ago. It still is valid. I'm not going to diss this beautiful little metric. But you've got to remember what bounce actually means. This is somebody that goes to a web page and they don't go to any other web page on that website, or if they click on a third-party link, like let's say you go to a web page and you sign up to Eventbrite, so you send them to a third-party website that isn't yours, that's going to get counted as a bounce. Now, I've been in many situations where we have been looking at the work that our content marketers have been doing, that our search engine optimization teams have been doing, and maybe somebody a bit more senior that's from maybe an older school way of marketing, or they don't understand the metrics, they'll look at this and go, well, that's got an 82% bounce rate. That page is terrible. Sack the team. Off you go. You've got to remember that it's all about intent. You know, there's so many people that are talking about this at the moment. Google won with their search engine because they were really good at usability. They were really good at understanding intent and matching that intent with the user. So you've got to look at your web pages and think, what was the task that the user was trying to achieve when they were on this particular web page? And for this is one of our blog pages, and it's for somebody that was we'd sent people to, and people had been getting answers to their question. The bounce rate is really high, but the time on page is really, really high. But in terms of meeting the intent of that user, we've done it, like it's already happened. So you've got to look at your website pages and think, where would you naturally see a high bounce rate, and where would you want to try and drive people further into the funnel? So it's not necessarily a bad thing. The next thing is timestamps in Google Analytics, as well as saying, oh, we've got a really high bounce rate and we need to fix this. The next one is people are not spending a lot of time on the website. And again, this is a computer program. It's a piece of JavaScript that you put on your website. Google will calculate it by somebody visiting page 1, and it's going to fire a hit into Google Analytics. And if they go to a second page, say 5 minutes later, it's going to register that as a hit. And then they go to page 3 and that gets registered as a hit. The way that this program is going to work out what your time on page is by going, right, what was the time between page 1 and page 2? And there's your difference, and there's your average time on page. So obviously, if you've got people that are going to, say, a blog page on a mobile phone in the morning, and they've been sent there from Twitter or from your social media or from an ad or whatever, and they read the bottom of that web page and then they get on with their merry day, that's going to then register as time on site is 0. And actually, that's not the best metric to look at, is it? Like sometimes the intent is that they're only going to be on that page, or maybe you've done a really good job that there's a sign up on that page and people have completed a goal for you. So what we actually do in our analytics, and we would recommend that you look into, is create something called a custom metric. You can just Google custom metric, time on page. It's just another way of calculating in incremental values what the actual time on that page is. And you're then avoiding just, did they go on another page, and then we'll just divide the difference. So when you're building reports to people, just bear this in mind. I try and avoid reporting on bounce rates and time on page, because I think there are other meaningful metrics that are much, much better for you to actually work on. The next thing is to think on your reports in terms of segmenting your data. There's a bit of a tendency to show everything, like here's all of my users. So let's say you have 1,000 users to your website, and you'll go, fantastic, here's everybody on my web page, or website even. What you want to get to is a point where you show everything. You know, you give the high level 1,000-foot bird view, or whatever the phrase is, but you want to start segmenting your data so that you can actually start to understand what your users are doing on your website, and then you can start adapting your strategies to make them do what you want them to do. So for this, you want to be thinking about, well, what does good look like for you? So every business is different, but I would want to look at, who are my best customers? So if we think of a chart where you've got an axis for time and you've got another axis up the other side that's for your conversions time, if you've calculated it correctly, that is, you can start to work out, if I've got everybody in the middle that's an average, what does really good look like? So who spends a lot of time and a lot of money on my website? So how many sessions did they have? How many times did they come back and complete those tasks? Who are the worst customers? So who are the people that don't really do what you want them to do, and they cost you a lot of time and money? You want to be doing less of that. And hopefully you've got some questions that you specifically want to answer as well. So you might be saying, well, I'm focused on a campaign. How did the last campaign do? Show me all the users from New York. Show me only the organic traffic, that kind of thing. So you want to be thinking about the work that you're doing and how you want to slice and dice this information in a way to make it meaningful, and a way to show some context to what you're doing. Now, one of the things that we need to be mindful of when we are segmenting our data is how Google defines a user session segment and a session segment, because there's a big impact in how they actually attribute values. And I've seen this in a lot of reports where people only focus on session data, others only focus on user data, and they're still sat there scratching their heads thinking, why can't I get my budget signed off? Why can't I get people to understand the value of the work that I'm doing? So let's start by thinking about, well, what is a user in terms of Google Analytics? Users are your user segments, essentially. They are going to show you all the sessions that belong to that particular user and all the interactions that they had with that particular website. Whereas when I look at my session segments, it's only going to show the final session where the users interacted the site, and especially when you're building something that's going to say conversions. So if you're saying, show me everybody that came from organic traffic and they converted, Google is literally sieving through all of this information to just pull out a segment. And if you specified it to be a session-based segment that came from organic and they converted. Now, the problem with this is you can absolutely knock yourself out with this, because maybe in the particular business that you're in the user journey, that the first session of a user was organic, and then the second session was PPC, and then the third session was email, and then it was a retargeting message, and then they came directly and converted. If you're going to be attaching conversion values when you're looking at your sessions, bear in mind that Google is looking for the last hit. So I've seen people build reports where they haven't done like a kind of structured approach to say, here are all of our users that came from organic search, here are the sessions from the search, and looking at how they converted and what they did. You've got to be very careful how you balance these two. Also be mindful that when it comes to conversion data, you can only look back 90 days. So if you've got a longer conversion path, then you just want to look out for that. You'll find that information in your multi-channel funnels report under time lag. For the majority of businesses, though, in terms of somebody coming to your website, filling out a form, playing a video, giving you the cash, I would say you would be looking within a 90-day window anyway. But just bear in mind your user versus sessions, because you can knock yourself out quite easily, and you don't want to do that because it'll make you a little bit sad. Now on to the reporting interface. So we've gone through just a few reminders to what's bounce rate, how does Google calculate time on the page, thinking about segmenting our data and when we're looking for users and sessions. It's now time to start having a look at some of the maybe lesser known features in Google Analytics, but one that you should start using a little bit more frequently. You need to give context with everything that you are doing, and you can get context from looking at date comparison. So when you go into your reporting interface, in the top right hand side where you've got the date ranges, you want to be looking at this month versus the previous month. So here's January, and then you're going to compare that with December. But because you've got cyclical business cycles, I'd also want, if you've got the data, to look at how does this January compare to the previous January, 2018 January, compared to January 2019. The reason why you want to give both those comparisons and then an average is because you're trying to tell a story. And depending on your business, so we did some work for a company, and they were quite seasonal. So December, they sold loads of stuff. Like they were a brand of beverage drinks that I'm quite familiar with. So at Christmas time, they sell a lot of this stuff. But in January, it gets quite quiet because people don't want to drink as much, having a dry January. So if you look at your marketing and go, oh, we only had 100 users that came in January compared to like 1,000 people in December, it doesn't mean that you're bad, because you could compare your January 2019 to January 2018, you might have only had 50 people. So then you're showing the growth. And then if you start adding segments to this data to see where you're gaining or not necessarily gaining, then you can start to make better suggestions with your data. The next thing that I like to do in reports is to add a secondary dimension. So all this is I'm adding another line to this chart. Essentially, that's all I'm doing, but it can really help to give better clarity to your reports. I did it a lot when we did our webinar on tracking, but this is another example of looking at hour of day. So this is the hour of day report in Google Ads, and it's really helpful to be like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because you can't assume that everybody understands. What does 0 represent? Does 0 represent Monday? Is that a Sunday? Is it a Saturday? Like, you're not necessarily sure. You can just click on the arrow to say secondary dimension, and then you can type in the dimension and metrics that you would like to layer next to that particular report. So in this instance, I can just start to type in day of week name, and then in my report, I then get the day of week, but then I've got the day of week name next to it. So it makes it a lot easier for me to digest that information. All the reports allow you to do this. So you can go into your acquisition reports, and you've got the default channel groupings. You can add a secondary dimension to put in source or medium, or when you're drilling down into your referrals report, which is just going to show you what the website is giving you a link. So maybe it says the Washington Post sent you a link. You can add a secondary dimension and type in something like full referral path, and it'll show you the actual URL deep within that website where you got that traffic. It's just going to make this reporting interface a whole lot easier to understand. So play around with your date ranges and start looking at secondary dimensions in your reports. And the next favorite button that I've got in terms of making it a lot easier to digest all of this information in analytics is the compare to the site average. So this is in the top right side. If I go back a slide, oh no, I don't have that on here. Apologies. Right hand side to what I've got in this screenshot, you will have this at the top right hand side. You've got the grid, which is the default data. So all the data goes into that that grid where we just added that secondary dimension. And then you've got a little icon that is the compared to site average. And I really like this button because as human beings, we're not really designed to process pages and pages and pages of numbers. It's just really difficult. Some people are like, mathematic wizards and they can see all of the insights. I need a little bit more help. So if you click on that, oh, there we go, you can see that. You can see the compared to the site average button. And then depending on the report that you're in, you can then select the different values. So instead of just seeing all of the data, I might want to say, compared to the site average, and this is thinking about your segments again, average being slap bang in the middle. Here's all of my users and the average time on page is X. The average order value is X. The average time on page is X. What is better or worse than the site average? So this is where you want to see a lot more in terms of ideas for your segments. If I click revenue on this report, how much clearer is that to look at my hour of day report and say, right, day of week, and that's really hard for me to understand with the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So then I add a secondary dimension to say day of week name, and then on the compared to the site average, I can say, when do I make more money? When do I make more revenue? And you can do this in other reports in terms of how long they stay on the report, especially if you've got people that are still going, oh, bounce rate, and go, yeah, but look at how many new users this web page got us, or look at how long they stayed on the web page, that kind of thing. And this visually is really nice to do as screen grabs to give it to people to say, look, I'm going to start playing around with my budget and when I'm going to be spending my cash. And this gives you a little bit more of an easier way of looking at the data. And obviously green is good and the red is bad. It's below the site average. And you would take this and use it as inspiration to focus on your segments, and bearing in mind, is it a user segment or a session segment? So we talked about user experience and reporting. So we've gone through the fact that we don't all sit there and go, oh my God, I wish everybody would just love all my reports that I spent all day doing, because we've all been there. Let's be honest, we've all been there, and there's nothing more soul destroying than spending hours and hours on a report and nobody reads it. And then thinking about how Google uses bounce and time and segments with their users and their sessions. You've dug into the reporting interface and you've started looking at your time comparisons, you're adding your secondary dimensions, you're looking at your compared to the site average. And now, my lovely ladies and gentlemen, it's time for you to actually build some reports. And you might want to build reports directly in Google Analytics using the custom dashboards, or you might be using the lovely Data Studio. And I love Data Studio. There are still a few little kinks and quirks with it, but my God, is it making things a lot easier, because in theory, you can now have a blank canvas to build a dashboard that you can repeat across different reporting properties and views and marketing channels. And it just makes things so much simpler instead of recreating the work over and over and over. But I think that marketeers are quite bad sometimes in building reports. We just throw everything in, give our client that 55-page report, or the boss the 55-page report, and we're done with it. And I'd like to see nicer reports. And I think some of the techniques that can do that for you is taking some sort of bit of a lean, a little bit of a wink from the user experience angle. So when I'm talking about user experience, UX as a particular discipline is all about designing digital or physical products that people are just going to find a total joy. You know, they're going to just, if you've ever like had an experience where you've downloaded an app or you've been on a website and you've gone, man, that was smooth, that was delicious, that was lovely. You want to have the same across not just all your customer facing marketing assets, but you want to do this internally with your internal communications as well, because you want to make sure that somebody goes from, this is really complicated and squiggly and I don't really know what's happening, to, wow, I got from A to B real easy there. I did not have to think at all. There's a book from a guy called Steve Krug, Krug, and it's not a very thick book. It's a nice, easy read. And the title of it is Don't Make Me Think. And the idea is that you should be creating your web pages and your digital marketing experiences that I intuitively know where I should go next. I don't want to have additional questions. There's no squiggly lines. I get from A to B really, really easily. So I want to start looking at this in terms of what we already know as marketeers. We already know from website pages that user experience, they love their wireframes and they love the fundamentals. You've got from classic how we're taught to read, you know, looking at newspapers, the title's really, really big in the big font, right? That's the most important thing that you want me to look at. And then there's a photo and the text underneath it is the header text, and that's going to help me like understand what's going on. So there's this kind of battle sometimes that we've seen when we've done UX and marketing and SEO, that sometimes you can have a UX lead that has created a page and they've styled it in a different way, but they didn't understand on-page SEO, and you want to blend the two worlds together. But also when it comes to our reports, I think that we can start to think about our reports and apply the same structures. So we're having clear headings, we are having clear subheadings, we are making sure that we are taking people from A to B and they know exactly what they should be doing and they should get the point. Like, I shouldn't be asking any additional questions at the end of it. So we're going to focus now on how do you actually apply these user experience techniques to actually create these fantastic reports that don't waste your time, so we can spend more time doing something with the insights, because that's the ultimate goal, guys, isn't it? That we spend less time digging through the trenches of the data and actually focus on doing something with the insights. Like, if I've got an hour of my time dedicated to analytics, I want to be looking at the data and pulling insights to actually improve my strategies and tactics. I don't want to spend that hour actually building the damn thing. That is a waste of everybody's time. So where do we start from this? There's a process that we like to go through, and it's something that hopefully you guys will get on board and start using. We've got a template for this as well. A reporting template on the website. Aiden will put a link in the chat box for this. But you've got to start with answering a couple of questions. My first question to anybody, and I love my analytics, I really, really do, unnecessarily so, I think, at times. But what's the actual point of the report? Like, don't report for the sake of reporting. Don't report because you feel it validates your work. Don't report because you have to somehow show the tangibility of what you're doing. We need to get away from this. We need to start getting better. So what is the point? If there's a reason for you to do this, then do it. Otherwise, you are wasting time. The next thing to think of is, who is getting the report? Because this can really change what is inside of that document. So a little bit like how you've got customer personas. So we're all familiar with this. And if you're doing user experience, you've got the empathy map. And actually, I'd argue that your personas and your user experience things should be mushed together anyway. I want you to start thinking about your reporting personas. If you've ever watched programs, we've got it in the UK, we've got Dragon's Den. I think in the States, it's Shark Tank. You have 4 very wealthy, rich people that just mock us with how much money they have. It's just sat there next to them. And you'll have a business person come in and say, oh, I've got this great idea for this business and it's wonderful. And, you know, they all get into the whole squishy, the why, the purpose, and it's fabulous. And then it comes down to the numbers. And out of those 4 people, they all care about something different. So I've watched Dragon's Den here, where one of them's like, so tell me about your reach, tell me about your marketing strategies and what you're doing. And then the other guy's going, yeah, no, what's your return on ad spend and what's your return on investment? Because they care about different things. And depending on who you're reporting to, you might need to give more information or less information. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one who's been in this situation, but I've been in meetings where I have put a really beautiful dashboard on the board to try and get something signed off. And the board have gone, what's that thing in the right-hand side? Let's hypothetically say, oh, that's the pie chart for bounce rate. What's a bounce rate? And then you end up spending 5 minutes explaining a metric on the dashboard that you didn't want to draw attention to. And then the entire meeting has been hijacked and you end up doing something that you didn't want to do when you came out the meeting, which is not the purpose. So you've got to think about, who am I reporting to and what do they care about? So we call this process at the colouring department post-it note reporting. And this came from a true story of me sitting down with my CFO for a company that I worked for. And he said, yeah, this report that you send, Jill, I just want you top level figures. Can you pop it on a post-it note and put it on my desk? And I laughed. And he went, no, seriously, I want it on a post-it note. So I nervously kind of backed away and smiled and went, yeah, of course, I can do that. Went back to the office and had a little cry, had a little gin, and then sat down and thought, I can't possibly do this. Like, I have to give him the full report. I have to show, I think it was for an SEO strategy at the time. Like, I have to show all the links I'm getting in the before and after. And then I sat there and I thought, right, going through this process, what's the point? Like, I'm trying to validate the new agency that had come in to revamp our SEO. Okay, so there's a point in building this report. What's the persona? Like, what does the CFO care about? I'm like, oh, he just cares about cost. He really couldn't give two hoots about how many people played the video. He didn't care how. He was like, how much does it cost to get a customer, Jill, by the visit? How much does it cost to acquire them? What was the total return on investment? And because it was a software as a service, what's our monthly recurring revenue here? Don't care about the rest of it. Whereas the marketing guy might be like, no, I do want to know how many events were fired per session, Jill. How many people did play the videos? How many free trials have we got? What's our churn rate looking like? And you've also got to be thinking about the language that we use. Sometimes as marketeers, and I'm sure this is the same in any sector actually, you can end up throwing acronyms and jargon at people that won't necessarily tell you that they don't understand what you're talking about. So if in doubt, ask them. Just say, look, out of all the metrics that we could report on, what are your main key performance indicators? What can I do to help you? And I've done this agency side and client side. So I've done this to the board or the senior people to go, look, what do you care about? And I'll just do a kind of high level report for them. And then for the agency side of it, I'd speak to our clients and say, how can we make you look better? Like, how can we help you when you forward our report? Because we know that that's what you do. How can we help you, give you a high level bullet point of, hey, here's the big dirty dashboard. But by the way, here are a couple of metrics that you should really care about, so that they don't get asked any questions. Because nobody wants to dig in and start looking at these reports. They, don't make them think. The next thing is to think, well, what are the key messages? So out of the work that you're doing, out of the reports that you're building, what is the one thing that you want them to come away with? What's the one positive thing that you want them to come away with? So you've got to think about how you can work out who you're reporting to, what they care about, what kind of gets them excited and happy, and then how can I not make them think and get those messages to them real quick, and then how can I make it really easy for them to get the message? I think a gold stamp of reporting is if you give me a report and I don't have any questions about that report, then you've done a fantastic job in terms of usability. If you have people that start going, what's this number for? Oh, that's sessions. And is that higher or lower than the previous month? Oh, yeah, that isn't on the report, is it? Okay, I'll go away and fiddle with that. You don't want to be in that situation. You want to be in a situation where you give them a report, it's just the right amount of information that they need, and you've done it in a way that is visually appealing. So one of the things that I like to do, and this is again stealing a UX technique, you might be familiar with building wireframes for your website pages. I've built wireframes for my email campaigns. And then after spending far too many hours building an Excel dashboard, and then it moved into a custom dashboard in analytics, and now with Data Studio, sometimes people don't really understand how long these things actually take to build. And some of them can be real fiddly and real time sinking holes of doom. So a way around this is I start to wireframe the reports, and then when they've been signed off, will I go away and build them? This also helps for you to kind of get a strategic, critical hat on in terms of what am I actually trying to say here, and what's the best way to represent this data? Like, does it have to be a bar chart, or would a metric work? Would a pie chart help? What if I added a heat map to it? So wireframing helps you clarify, how am I going to structure this report? And if you have tried with Data Studio, the first time I tried it, I'm not going to lie, guys, I just kind of sat and stared at it and went, I'm not 100% sure how I'm meant to work this. And it's almost like you've been paralyzed by choice. The blank canvas is like, oh, you can add a chart, Jill. Fabulous. I don't know where to start, and I'm feeling a little bit anxious. Whereas if you wireframe these reports before you get started, then life gets a little bit easier. So let's have a look at some examples. So let's say you're going to work through your questions. So this is your point of how do I build these reports to make my life a little bit easier. Let's say that you are, because we're talking to a lovely Semrush audience here, that you only really care about organic. You don't care about email. You don't care about the content team. Well, maybe you do. But you want to focus on, well, what's the point of the report? Okay, I want to isolate all of the traffic from organic because I only care about my SEO strategy, and I want to see what's working, what isn't working, so that I can tweak it and make things a little bit easier. Okay, you've now validated the point of, well, why am I building this damn thing in the first place? You then want to think about who's getting the report. So maybe you're building it for the dude or dudette that signed off the budget in the first place, and then thinking through those reporting personas, you're going to be thinking, right, what's the CEO like? What metrics do they want? What do they need? Like, what's really important to them at the moment? And then start thinking about the key messages. So you know what they care about, but you're also trying to tell a story with this data as well. So let's say with this example of I've got an SEO strategy, I'm giving it to the person that signed the check for it, and they don't care about the word disavow. They don't care about links. They don't care about technical SEO or JavaScript. They just care that I gave you some money. Did I get anything at the end of it? What was the return on investment? Do I get more customers? Yes or no? They really can't, they don't care about anything else. It's like, did you make me money? So the messages that I'd want to get across could be, right, I want to show which search engines we're getting traction with. And because it's probably going to be Google for most people, and if it is Google, the reason why you're going to be continuing with that strategy. And I want to show how many users are coming from organic, what pages that they visited, if they converted or not. And notice here that I've used the word users, not sessions, because I don't want to build a report and go, show me all the sessions that converted. If that wasn't the last touch point, the last non-direct touch point, you might end up building a report that makes you look a little bit bad when actually you were freaking awesome. And you don't want that. And another thing to message for you guys here is it doesn't necessarily mean anything really, really, really bad, she says lightly, if the spark lines are going the other way. I remember feeling super disappointed when I built a report and the lines went in the direction that I didn't want it to go in. And I had a really super amazing mentor called Leslie. And she said, Jill, you've just been given a get out of jail card. You've just been given some insights as to what's not working. And you have a decision here to turn it around, focus on what you're going to do to turn it around. Or if it's something like a paid search campaign, you stop spending money on the stuff that doesn't make you any cash. It's not a bad thing. Like you can't, and I'm going to borrow a phrase here from an amazing copywriter called Joanna Weeb. She does a lot of conversion copywriting. She's always said, don't guarantee a win. Guarantee insights, guarantee understanding. So when you're looking at this data, you're not guaranteeing that your strategies and what you're doing is going to always give you that hockey stick of growth, but you are guaranteeing insights and learnings, and that you are confident enough to take that data and do something with it and present those messages in a way that you can actually get your point across. And then for this bit, there's a lot of text in here, mainly for when you get the slides afterwards and you can work through them. You want to be thinking, how can I make this really easy for the CEO to understand how well this is doing for me? So I'm not going to go through all of this because I've got a visual representation of what this could look like. So a real basic wireframed example, but I could sit here and go, right, I'm going to give it a title and I'm going to think about my user experience fundamentals. That's going to be the biggest heading, header 1, SEO review. I'm then going to have headers for each of my different metrics. And don't be afraid to write it in plain English. Don't assume that the person that gets the report understands. Remember, we're thinking about that don't make me think. So instead of writing something like, oh, conversion rates, like did they convert, where did our traffic come from, what pages do they land on? So you're almost making it idiot proof when you're looking at that data. Within Google Data Studio, you have an option to put a date range on it. So if they go, oh, Jill, this is amazing. Can I have a look at the data for February? Do it yourself, Bob. You can just click on this little link and you've got your own little date range for it. There's an option to switch between views. So I could create a report that I could use over my different reporting views and my different properties as well, which is a real time saver if you're going to build a report that is not got anything super bespoke to you. So if there's standard dimensions and metrics, provided the data's in there, it'll come in. And then thinking about those messages, I'll be saying things like, okay, what's the best way to visually represent this data? I'll do a pie chart so that very quickly they can go, oh, right, we get all of our traffic from Google. So your recommendation on why we should opt for Google is valid. How many users come from SEO? I would give them a number and I would write, here's how many users. And then I would show the previous period. And I would write that. I would say, here's how many users over the last 30 days, and is it up or down compared to the previous month and or the previous year? Because remember what I said about don't have somebody looking at the report and going, well, is this great? Like if we had 1,000 users this month, but last month it was 10,000, you're pretty crap. But if you're giving me that data to show where those time comparisons are coming from, all the better. There's options in Data Studio to calculate your metrics. So you don't have to put, here are all my 20 goals, you could say, right, I've got 3 goals here: contact form, telephone number, and an info at email address clicked. You could just bundle those all together and go, did anybody contact us? Here's all the 3 together. Depending on who you're giving this information to, means that you can visualize it in a different way. Would a heat map help? Would a bar chart help? Like, how can you make things easier, just nice and easy? So what we're going to do next is go through some real life examples. They're not the final end ones, and I've blurred out some of the data so I don't get any trouble with the ones that I've built, but just to show you the process in the real world and not a cartoon. Remembering we want to avoid the data vomit. So I want you guys to get to the point where you're diving into your analytics interface, you're understanding exactly how your account is structured. And for that, shameless drop, go back to the webinars we did, number 1, 2, and 3, which goes through the fundamentals of getting your account set up properly. Are the filters working? Have you got goals set up? Are you firing everything correctly? And then understanding, how does Google actually work when it comes to calculating all of this stuff? And then playing around with your segments so you're getting a bit of an idea, and then working through these questions. What's the point of the report? Who's getting it? Reporting personas, those post-it notes. Like, if you can't simplify something really strategically, then you're drowning in the tactics, and nobody wants that. And then thinking about those key messages and wireframing things so that you can actually go off and build it. So to do this, I'm talking a lot about Data Studio. This isn't a webinar on Data Studio, although I think that would be an awesome webinar to have a look at, because it is super cool. But this is the example that I've been using. I think personally that Google is probably going to slowly phase out custom reports, because they've spent an awful lot of money on this tool, and it's really useful. Like, previously I would have had to create this report for one particular view, and now I can apply it to all views. I can share it. It's visually very appealing, because that data vomit is really hard for some people to digest, whereas this has been a lot easier to get across. So it doesn't necessarily look super sexy, does it, when you're doing these wireframes? Best thing that you can do is a pen and paper. You can use tools like Balsamiq or whatever. And sometimes if it's for certain projects that I've done, I have done it on paper and then I've mocked it up really nicely, because, and Aiden will probably nod in agreement, although I can't see him here, my handwriting is terrible. So it sometimes has to be typed out, otherwise people don't know what they're doing. So this wireframe here, to give some context, I'm going to show you what it looked like afterwards. It was for a mental health charity, and specifically they wanted to show the purse string holders, the budget holders, that they wanted to have more staff in the office when they had their helpline open, and how could they get that information. So we were thinking about, right, how many users come to the website over time, and specifically because they had events firing. So this is the event tracking, people opening the chat box, closing the chat box, that kind of thing. This also helped when you're wireframing to write down what's the name of the dimension and values, because the user interface can be a little bit, it's not the most helpful. It's awesome, but it's not the most helpful. So it can be a lot easier and faster to just use the search options when you're building anything in analytics and go, I am looking for an event that's labeled G form, or I'm looking for a dimension that's called specifically this, because again, it's a computer program. If it doesn't match the rule, then you're going to get a big fat 0. So this is what it looked like when we completed it, and it went on to get another bit of a fancy varnish. But this was a high level overview to show, right, how many users and sessions did we have? What are the top pages? Are there any trends? So are there any particular days of the week and the time that we get a lot of people that are using the web chat or the get help page? And for this, and I've blurred out some of the data so you can't see everything. We had in the first grid, we've got users, new users, sessions, and then total number of page views, because we're looking at how many people went on a particular page to then fire this chat box. And then I built out a day of week so that they could see very quickly when they get more sessions and use it. And let's say hypothetically it's on a Wednesday, just to give some context for the pages, the overall pages for the website. People went to the main website, and then they went, the second highest page in terms of sessions was the web chat. So we needed to give it in context when you look at all of the sites. So that's where the box underneath, where we've got calmzone.net website sessions and page views, entire website. And then the one in purple was done specifically in purple, because that's the one I want you to really look at. I might look at all of these page views where people are looking and firing the events that open up the web chat. And we did it in a visual way where you could see that it gets really high between 9 and 10 o'clock at night, and then it drops off. And we've got other reports that layered into this to go into it in a bit more detail. But it meant that instead of having, and you remember my favorite quote, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. If you turn around to somebody and go, oh, it's really busy, I think we should have more staff on a Wednesday between 10 and 11. They'll be like, yeah, all right, whatever. You can visually show the data in a meaningful way, and a way that doesn't make them think. They'll go, oh yeah, I can see that big line gets really high at 10 o'clock. Oh yeah, we do get a lot of people, and on a Wednesday. And you can start spotting trends, and you've built a report that is a repeatable process, then you're winning. Like, it's just making things a little bit easier for people to actually digest and understand. Another one, this is for a recruitment company, and I was sat working with the marketing lady, and she's like, do you know what, I just need to give a real high level view to the board, and specifically the CEO. He just wants to know how many people applied for 4 specific goals that they had. So they had like a graduate recruitment application part of the website. So I was like, okay, we can have, here are your 4 goals, the ones that you really care about, with header 1 across all of them. We'll do the goal ID number, and then we'll do it as a percentage point as well. Because you could say to somebody, hey, I've got a 2% conversion rate. That might be one person. So you want to give some context. So we said, right, we'll give the number of people, and then that goal as a conversion percentage. And then we'll show, is it up or down compared to the previous 30 days? And then he really wanted to know, where were people coming from in the world? So it's like, well, we can just dump in a geo map then to make it look prettier of where are your applicants coming from. And then he wanted to know, well, where did they come from? The money that I'm giving you as a marketing department, source and medium. So not necessarily the default channel groupings. That was too complicated for him. He's like, did they come from Twitter? Did they come from Facebook? What was organic? What was email? So we're like, right, we'll just scrape off the default channel grouping and go, these are your top traffic sources and the sessions that actually did the stuff that you wanted it to do, because you can segment and filter it. And this is what it looked like in the end. Again, it doesn't have to look super exciting. You can add images and logos and whatnot. Get the basics on first. The rest is just window dressing at the end of the day. Do something with the insights, and don't worry about the sparkly tinsely lights. So we added a date range on it. We could split through by source if we wanted to look at where are these goals coming from in terms of, were they from Twitter or LinkedIn? There was a drop down so we can filter through all of these different goals, and I've blurred out some data there so you can't identify the company, but it meant that they could at a very high level understand what we wanted to show them. And obviously for the main marketing people, there's like a 20-page very detailed document on all the different strategies, but the boss didn't necessarily need to have all of that. Another one was for an agency, and this was more of an overview to give to the board in terms of like, what's everybody doing? Like, you know, we might be winning awards and we might be landing loads of business, but like high level, like what's happening? So when you go through the same questions, like who are the reporting personas? What do they care about? How can I get this message across? We then started thinking about, okay, how can we show them the data in a nice, easy way? So again, we've got a dashboard, and we've got the date ranges on the right-hand side. We could split between websites, because this particular agency had about 15 websites. So we were able to, and it was a cross-domain one as well, so we could attach the same ID values to some of these reports. And all we wanted to show was how many users, and is it up or down from the previous 28 days? And that was an interesting one, because I always go to 30, and the board were like, no, we run on 28-day cycles. I'm like, handy to know, noted, put it on the report, so we don't give them a report for just the last month or the last quarter. They wanted 28 days, give them the 28 days. So we have the users, the new users, the sessions, and the total page views. Somebody on the board really wanted to know about the devices. Was it desktop? So I was like, well, we'll just sneak that one in the right hand side just to keep them happy. And then the source medium, so where does the link live? big, broad bucket. And because they were doing a lot of PR outreach, social media outreach, link building to the website, we put in a full referrer. So it was we got a link from website.com, and what was the full URL? website.com/ this agency is amazing, or whatever, so they could work through it. And because this is an interactive report, you can click through and see what's going on. And then we're doing a lot of campaigns as well, and this goes back to our webinar where we talked about tracking. Provided you're tagging things correctly, these reports are beautiful. If people start messing with the system, computer's going to say no. So they were tagging everything correctly, so we could say, show me the May campaign, show me the Christmas campaign, because we wireframed and we understood exactly how we'd labeled this, so when we built the report it made it easier. Now the bit that I'd like to show you at the bottom, which may or may not make sense, so I'm going to walk you through this now. I've talked about this before when we went through our goals webinar, that you should have more than one goal. And the reason why you want to have more than one goal is because you want to stitch the journey together. And because Google Analytics works on one of 7 attribution models. So most of the reports in analytics are on 100% of the credit goes to the last non-direct channel. The multi-channel funnels report is last touch. So if it was direct, they'd get credit. And then there are 5 others that you can play around with. Because you can look into your acquisition report and you could be like, oh, social media is a bit crap, nobody converts, but they might have done something else. That particular channel or that campaign happened. So what we did here is we layered all of the sources, like where are they getting the traffic from and where are the conversions coming from. So we have the users and the sessions, because sessions are great, but users are the people that are actually converting. And then we layered the top goals. So it's about like going through the journey. So you've got how many people visited the LinkedIn profiles, how many people downloaded content, how many people clicked on the telephone number. And we heat mapped this so you can kind of go along with your eye and go, okay, so let's pretend the second one is Twitter. Twitter's really good at getting people to click on the telephone number, and email's really good at getting people to submit a contact form, and organic's really good at getting people to, I don't know, watch a video or something. It means that you're giving some of your channels a bit of a break. It's like the football story that we use. You've got loads of players on your team and the report is skewing to the person that scores the goal. You don't send the rest of the team home. So visualize that in a way that for this particular audience, they really didn't want a lesson on what is a customer journey and how does attribution work. They were like, we gave you some cash, where's the money at the end of it? So it's just a case of how can we make that a little bit easier. So hopefully that's been useful. Final tip, and if there's anything that you take away from this webinar, go and follow Helpfulllee. This guy has done so much for the Data Studio community. He's got, if you go on his Twitter now, he's got a whole resource that he has collected. I think at last count, it was something like 280 different templates, guys, as in you can click on them and copy them and borrow them and edit them and tweak them. Don't just take them as like, oh, I'll have that and just run away with it. Still work through the question, still think about what's the point of the report, who's getting it, what's in this template that I can then tweak to my requirements, how can I get that message across to people, and then wireframing them, having conversations with people, and then building so that you're not wasting your time. There's nothing more soul destroying for me to spend so long building reports and people take the numbers the wrong way, or they don't even look at the data. So if you want to get more help on Data Studio, which we all need more help on Data Studio because it's only really just come out of beta, then go follow this guy and thank him for his time to the community. Because look at that, look at all that, like all that resources. There's like SEO ones. I think there's one that Al Yeda did. There's loads of stuff that the Deep Crawl team have done. There's loads of stuff that other agencies have done. There's some really good stuff here from the digital marketing community so that we can all get better at our jobs. You know, it's like just everybody working together in one squishy loveliness. So always nice. So we've gone through quite a lot, and as much as Aiden as well, I can just sit. I'm sat in a room on my own. Actually, the entire floor has just emptied, and I'm sat talking to myself. We have gone through in this session how does Google calculate certain metrics? So bounce rates, time on page, the difference between sessions and users in terms of how Google's going to attach those hits to them. So you've got to be very careful when you're building your reports to make sure that you get the right output. Looking at the reporting interface, playing around with the date ranges, add secondary dimensions, start using that lovely compare to the site average. If anything, it's fun. Like, it just makes the report look better. And then when we're thinking about reports, not just dumping a load of data and metrics for the sheer sake of it, actually think through the techniques that we're using as marketeers to make a joy, like make people not think. So those user experience techniques have really helped me create much better reports and have a better output when I'm trying to tell a story with my data. So I'm going to stop talking now, and I'm going to close my screen, and I'm going to wait for the lovely Aiden. Oh, like, stop sharing. There we go. Yeah. Sorry. Like, can you see me? Like, am I there?
No, I can see your avatar, but your avatar is perfectly acceptable for now, Jill, whilst you tinker away with actually turning your cam on, if you'd be so kind.
Oh, I don't know how to do that. Oh my
You don't
God.
know how to turn your cam on? Yes, you do.
No, you know I'm ridiculous when it comes to...
That's true, you are.
Not working. It says camera not working.
Okay. Regardless, we don't really need to see your face, as beautiful as it is, in truth.
The avatar's much better anyway, let's be honest.
I mean, all that effort on creativity. There have been a few questions come in. Actually, to be fair, we picked them up in the chat already, and you actually already flagged Helpfulllee on Twitter, of course, in his amazing Data Studio reports, and we thank him collectively for his contribution to our industry. A few other things have kind of come through in various different ways and means. What's your actual favorite report? What's your go-to report that you like to look at the most? And for context's sake, I always like Crestadine always used to say, look, he creates a site search report versus exit page report and calls it the report of broken dreams. So that sounds fun. What about you, Jill? What's your go-to grab bag report?
Oh, I think it's going to be the assisted conversion report. And the reason for this is you can drill down not just by your campaigns or your sources or your mediums. You can actually look at this by landing pages as well. So a bit like, you know, what was the page that converted? They get 100% of the credit. You might have written a load of blog content and that blog content actually converted, but later on in the journey. So for me, I don't know if it's just the mother in me, like my kids at the moment keep fighting and I'm like, play fair, be nice. I'm kind of the same with like marketing. It's like everybody should be given their own like fair chance of like, no, the work that you're doing, good job. Like you all get a sticker kind of thing. So yeah, assisted conversions are probably my favorite reports to kind of...
It's really funny, actually. We differ somewhat on that one a little bit. And guys, a conversation that Jill and I have quite a bit. Jill loves assisted conversion reports. I like MCF reports, so multi-channel funnel reports. Speaking to probably my background a little bit in media, I love MCF reports so much. Now, whilst neither the assisted conversion report nor the MCF report are where you should start, for sure, they're really, really interesting to start to dig into them, both of which live under the conversions tab on the left-hand side in the Google Analytics interface, in case you wanted to go and have a little look into it. Question equally here, Jill. The bounce rate has come up a little bit, weirdly, actually, around this particular webinar. Is it worth reporting on bounces, in your opinion? Is there any context that you can think off the top of your head, generally speaking, where a bounce is a valuable addition to a report?
So as I said, it should be in context. I actually, and I'm sure I'm not the only person who has done this. If you wanted to, like some people just really get a bite of bounce rate and they will not let it drop. They're like, our bounce rate is 70% and your entire worth as a marketeer is going to be judged on said bounce rate. You can just fire an event in Google Tag Manager to say, hey, if somebody plays a video or downloads something, pretend they went to another web page. Like you can have it as an interactive hit and your bounce rate could drop to 30% and everybody's happy again. So you can fiddle with the numbers if you wanted to. I don't really put them on the report, really. Because it goes down to the intent, and that's where I'd look at content groupings over bounce rate. Like show me all the blog pages, show me all the product pages, show me all the contact pages, and some are going to have a higher bounce rate. Like contact page, if people have like the Crestadine report, they went on their website and they ended on your contact page, or they just went straight to your contact page because they just typed in colouring in department address to send us gin. please do. I'll never be offended. Then yeah, like it'll have a high bounce rate. That doesn't necessarily mean that that page is bad. So yeah, I think it depends on who you're reporting to. As I said, there have been some people that I've reported to, and that's been the one metric that they've taken over the last 15 years, and they've just stuck with it. You can tweak it. You can tweak that number, and then they think you're amazing, and then they'll just let you get on with your job.
And with that, getting on with your job, I'm going to park it here, Jill. Because
Yeah.
we are, incidentally, we are on the hour, and we don't want to bore people. I know. But huge thank you to you, of course, for running us through your wonderful mind in the form of reporting. Huge thank you to absolutely everybody for joining us for this, of course, the 5th Google Analytics series for the wild, the outrageous, the wonderful Semrush. Jill and I are the coloring in department, as I'm sure you're probably already aware. Thank you very much for all of your questions throughout the previous hour, because it's been an hour together. You've all been lovely, which has been fab. Nice to meet you all. I'm sure we'll see you on a webinar sometime in the future. But with that, we bid you adieu from both Jill, myself, and of course the lovely team at Semrush. Have a great day wherever you're at in the world, and we hope to see you very soon indeed. Take care.